Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. This is Ukraine War Frontline update. No, it's not. It's a news update for the 26th of July 2023. Although it's partly a Frontline update, that's where we're going to start. This is part 2 of my news update. Please check out part 1 as well. We are moving on to the front line. Now, I have been accused by someone a couple of days in a row saying, why do you repeat yourself in your videos? And that's because I have a whole frontline video. And I also have a frontline section to this video where I will be using a lot of this information to also make my claims in the whole frontline video, which is a longer version of this. I split these videos into chapters. So if you don't want to see the same thing twice, get rid of this or move on from this chapter to the next one. But this is like a truncated version of what I'll be saying later. Right. Okay. So what has been going on? As you can see from all my tabs, quite a lot. Right. First things first, northeast sector, which is Luhansk and Kharkiv Oblast, Kupiansk to Svatova to Crimea. This is in the Svatova area, really, as you can see Svatova there, just to the west and to the southwest. There have been some Russian movements there, right? Russian MAD claims that Russian forces have taken control of Sahivka in the Luhansk region, west of the Zherebets River, small hamlet. Only hosts a couple of houses and 20 residents pre-war. That's unconfirmed. That's what No Report said last night. And of course, playing it down a little bit there. There you can see Sahivka and this movement on Kovalivka and Karmazianivka, Novovodyanye down here. And then further up to Novosilivska in the Kuzumivka area too. So they really are pressuring quite a lot along there. And then, as you can see later, just not long later, No Report says, following the Russian MAD, both Ukrainian and Russian sources agree that Russia has taken over the hamlets of Sahivka, Nadia, and Novohirivka, west of the Zherebets. Russia's goal is reaching Borova. The Ukrainians have reportedly set up new defenses east of Novosahivka, and that place that I struggle to be able to pronounce just there. So the Russians are advancing onwards, and it's not good news really for the Ukrainians there. Russia has captured the Ukrainian villages of those that I've just mentioned, and the advance is between 6 and 8 kilometers. That's really quite a quick advance. Of course, like I said yesterday, there aren't Ukrainian defenses here because they were getting ready to go on a counterattack. You don't really build your defenses. You'd be using up an awful lot of mines and resources and so on and so forth. And when you're planning on controlling all that land and not being on a defense, you kind of don't do that. And that means, however, that if the Russians go on the attack, then all of a sudden they can take loads of land that, we're not seeing down in Zaporizhia because it's littered in with mines. Right. Andrew Perpetua says Ukraine's situation north of Crimea has deteriorated. Ukraine, this is due to troop rotation that left inexperienced brigades in charge of a long stretch of front line where Russia immediately capitalized. This is something the Russians do quite a lot, actually. They wait for troop rotations and then they hit. This is, pretty sensible idea because you get inexperienced troops coming in that don't know the lay of the land, that might not have even fought much before or whatever. While you've got the chaos of them moving, other people going back, some people coming in, you hit them there. They're not really knowing what's going on, and you're going to get most advantage from doing that. So over the past week, Russia's moved to a depth of 5 kilometers over a front that is approximately 9 kilometers wide. He says, showing his maps there, they are moving in the direction of Borova. This town is most likely their goal, although they're currently approximately 20 kilometers away. But it requires them to go over this ridge. So in order to reach Borova, Russia will need to cross a small ridge line, separates the Oskil and the Zherebets watersheds. Approximate elevation of the ridge is 195 to 200 meters, although it can be lower or higher in some areas. However, the current positions believed to be occupied by the Russian forces are between 160 and 70 meters in elevation, so the total change in elevation is approximately 30 meters over a distance of 6 kilometers. Although obviously you can look at the map and see how the terrain is shaped. Ukraine is moving in reserves, and we will have to see if the situation can stabilize. There was talk yesterday, and I said that apparently Ukrainians had stabilized it. Evidently not. Russians are still pushing on and quite successfully there. They have entered. Oh, right. Then he goes on to talk about Klishchiivka, and there's lots of mapping and stuff, and he goes down to Zaporizhia. It's a really good thread from Andrew Perpetua, but I will actually go on to other sources now. But anyway, before we get to Klishchiivka, Theti mapping says, there are these claims of Russian. Um, uh, Russian advances. He says that I'm not just going to take it on deep state map says, wait for other sources. But yeah, the Russians are definitely making some advances in those areas, Karmazianivka, Ryorodka area. Some multiple sources admitting this. And then I saw this. I haven't seen this anywhere else. So last night in Luhansk, under the cover of artillery fire, the armed forces of Ukraine successfully recaptured approximately 2.15 square kilometers of land within the territory that had been captured by the enemy in the past few days. Yeah, don't know about confirming that, but there could be a counterattack in the area. Now, so that is success for the Russians in that general area. And then as we come down to Bakhmut, a lot of success yesterday for the Ukrainians. I read the whining of the Russians about what is happening in Bakhmut briefly. The commander of the Russian armed forces uses meat defense. There is a kilometer of the front. It was dug out and equipped for 30 people, and 150 people were driven there. And then this is referring to some footage inside a command center where they're looking at a tank going through a tree line, and then a bunch of Russians basically do a runner running away from them from the tree line. But yeah, the talk from one of the chaps there is that these are heavily defended by people, lots of people, cramming these defensive lines to a greater degree than you would normally expect. Not that that's in that footage itself, but the claim is that there is a meat defense there. The words. Ukrainian forces south of Bakhmut liberated Andriivka. The liberation of Klishchiivka is imminent. There are claims now that has been liberated. Ukrainian forces already inside the village. Russian forces abandoning positions for the Ukrainian forces at the ridge line overlooking Klishchiivka. This most certainly must be like shooting in a shooting gallery, so looking down, Russians retreating, and obviously being able to get clear shots on them. Ukrainians have entered Klishchiivka from the southwest. Russian artillery is targeting them inside the settlement, so there's definite geolocation that Ukrainians are in Klishchiivka. And then interesting claims coming out from Russians themselves. This is one hell of an arc. Rush is saying that mobilized Mobics have left Klishchiivka, while Wargonzo is saying they do not agree to leave. A literal translation. So I'm trying to work out what that is. So Rusich saying, according to our information, we left Klishchiivka today. The mobilized personnel, naturally poorly motivated to fight, tired of the fighting and not understanding how much longer they are in the special military operations zone, left their positions. Wargonzo, on the other hand, said, our fighters do not agree to leave Klishchiivka. Now, what does that mean? Does it mean that they didn't agree to the commands to leave and they wanted to stay there to fight? Or, what does that really mean? According to sources in the field, barge units, so there's reserve units and military personnel of the Russian Ministry of Defense continue to fight for the area of the settlement. Our artillery is active. The situation on the ground remains difficult, but too early to talk about leaving the settlement. So, bit of disagreement there. Reports from both Ukrainian troops and Russians. Sources supporting the changes on the map. A full retreat from Klishchiivka is preliminary. Russians are probably doing a fighting retreat. Osman from the 24th IDAR Battalion reports that half of Klishchiivka, plus or minus, is under Ukrainian control. This is from 21 hours ago. So I imagine now it's fully under Ukrainian control, or there's a strong possibility it is. Also, Russian channels are preliminary reporting that their forces have pulled out. And then there are unconfirmed reports tonight. This is Tim White last night, that Ukraine has breached one of Russia's lines of defense at the edge of Bakhmut. So Ukraine could be pushing at the city limits as well. I mean, I don't know the wisdom of that. I wouldn't want to be fighting through the city. I'd surround it and hammer it. It said that Ukrainian troops are back inside the town itself. So it's all looking rather good for the Ukrainians in the Bakhmut area. Then as we come to the southern lines around Velika Novosilka, around Robotna, around Kamyansky, things are happening too. Andriy Kovalev, the spokesman for the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, said that Ukrainian troops have gained, oops, no, I didn't want to do that, have gained around the vicinity of Staromilsk on the southern front. So there is success around Staromilsk. Exactly how much success is the claims are differing. Armed forces of Ukraine in the area of Staromyolsky have advanced up to 750 meters behind enemy lines, says Shershin, speaker of the Joint Press Center there. So success in Staromyolsky. Again, another one here saying Staromyolsky has been liberated. So that is the latest claim that I found. That was from this morning, early this morning, 7:20 my time. It's now 10:40. So it could be that Staromorsk is liberated. We do hear this at times, X and Y is liberated, and then actually, no, it's not liberated, or it is, but there are counterattacks, so it's more likely it's just a massive grey zone. I would say Staromorsk is certainly a grey zone. And then when we come to the west, along from where are we? From Staromyolsky, Velika Novosilka area there, along to the Orikhiv, just south of there, where we have so Staromyolsk is there, coming along to south there, which is Robotna. We have things happening there. Acting Russian governor of Zaporizhia region said that the situation in the area of Robotna, Novodanilivka, and Novopokrovka has escalated. The enemy tried to break through the defense at 4 in the morning. Russian channels report that since this morning, Ukrainian forces have resumed large-scale attacks towards Robotna. Heavy equipment and lots of artillery are reported. I've seen claims elsewhere. Yeah, here Rebar has claimed as a result of the attack on more than 80 armored vehicles, including tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, armored personnel carriers, and armored combat vehicles. The enemy managed to penetrate in 3 areas. Now fierce battles are going on in this area. Let's see. So when we heard Zelensky the other day saying it's going to gain pace, when we heard Margot Grossberg from the Estonians saying, things are just about to happen. Could this be it? I don't know. Could this be the kind of breakthrough that they've been looking for, or will it be another hit your head against a brick wall? How robust are the Russian defenses if you get past those first lines of defense? Because I've said before that you just need there's one argument that you just need a critical mass of attack that overcomes a defense. You are going to lose a shed load of stuff, right? And that's human beings, and that's equipment, right? You're going to lose a lot, but once you do that, if there's nothing behind, then that's what you need. You just need a massive mass of attack. But I think in order to have that massive attack, or that massive attack, you need to have destroyed all the artillery in the area. So I think that's what's happened, because otherwise it is shooting fish in a barrel. Destroy the artillery. We've had now 6 weeks of that artillery getting destroyed. We've had Russian claims today of the mass destruction of Russian artillery. Now, is that the time? Or do you have a couple more weeks? Is this just another kind of probing attack? It sounds a little bit more than probing as far as what we have experienced in the last 6 weeks, right? Okay. So that's moving off the front lines. There is multiple axes of attack from both sides. It's going to be a day full of news of the front line, I think, today. So bear with me, hang around ATP Geopolitics, and I'll let you know. Right, we have talk of a US aid package I've already let you know about, but just to let you know that the $400 million US aid package announced today, that was yesterday, it was that I spoke to you about yesterday, was facilitated via Presidential Drawdown Authority, which means that the material is taken directly from US Defense Department stocks. This is good for several reasons. First of all, that $400 million, it probably isn't $400 million. I'll just explain this ad nauseum, which is, it's sitting around in warehouses, it's being paid for. If you're going to give it, if it's being replaced by other stuff already, then effectively it's free. In fact, you might even make money on it, because for some of these things you have to decommission them. The cost of taking them apart so they're not dangerous, and then recycling them, or doing whatever you do to them, burying them, I don't know. It's cheaper to just go, have these, right? We're not using them, we're replacing them, have them. Oh, by the way, they're worth $400 million, right? That kind of thing. I'm not saying that's exactly what's going to happen with all these bits of kit, but that's one advantage. The other advantage is that you have the stocks already there, and you can just give them, right? So things like ground launch small diameter bombs, GLSDBs, like, we're going to give you $100 million worth of them. Brilliant, awesome. When are we going to get them? 2024. Because we've got to make them first, that kind of thing. So if it's drawdown, you're not ordering them from defense manufacturers, and they then have to make them. It's there. So this stuff, you can imagine, is it's probably already in Ukraine. To be honest, they kind of announce these things. Oh yeah, by the way, we're giving that. When are we getting it? Last week. So yeah, so you got Nazam, Stinger, HIMARS, rocket ammunition, 155 mil, 105 mil, 120 mil, 60 mil mortar rounds and artillery rounds, 32 strikers, tow missiles, javelins, Hornet unmanned aerial systems. So these are Americans getting hold of the Norwegian tiny little drones that you'll use in urban warfare. Tactical air navigation systems, demolition munitions for obstacle clearing, so MICLIC stuff, 28 million rounds of small arms ammunition, night vision devices, thermal imagery systems, spare parts, training munitions, and other field equipment. So I've told you that already, but just updating that and where it's coming from. Politico, however, reports today Western partners have so far failed to agree on bloody F-16 plan on training Ukrainian pilots. I mean, this is rumbling on and on. Western partners have not yet agreed on a plan to instruct Ukrainian pilots to fly F-16 fighter jets. This is the issue, possibly with coalitions, when you have like 8 countries or whatever it is saying, yeah, we get together, right, we're all together on this. Yep, we're all going to train. Yeah, okay. Well, who's doing the plan? I mean, I can't be bothered. Are you doing it? I can't be bothered. You doing it? I suppose if you ask nicely. And then this goes on and on. It's like, well, come on, who's doing it? Whereas if it was one nation, say, for example, the US, just an example, they'd be like, right, we're giving F-16s. We give the planes for training. We'll give the planes for actual use in warfare, and we're going to do the training. So you 5 people or you one person, you're going to sort that out for me now. Okay, sir, right, I'm on it. And job done, and it gets done, right? Because that's a kind of unilateral support for Ukraine. But when it's this multilateral support, things get lost in organization. And I guess that could be what's happened here. So far, no country in the Western Fighter Jet Coalition has publicly committed aircraft. I thought they had to support the training, and I thought it's taking place in Romania, that Netherlands were committing the training aircraft. That's what was. So you get these announcements, and then you get stuff that's contrary to the announcements. Who knows what's going on? No final decision on plans for the program has been made, despite hopes that it would start this summer. There were talks of it happening like imminently. Germany's Rheinmetall will deliver 2 more Skynex anti-aircraft gun systems to Ukraine. This is really great. These are in the coming months. They already have some of these, I believe. These are these super modern pieces of kit that I think they're modular type thing. I think they could be whacked on all sorts of places or just sat on their own. They fire immensely quickly, I believe. Complex is used to shoot down drones, cruise missiles, and guided munitions with the Oerlikon Mark III cannon, which has a range of 4 kilometers, firing 1,000 rounds a minute. So good stuff. Norway transferred another 22 million euros to the EU fund, which supplies military equipment to the armed forces of Ukraine, reports the Council of the European Union. And then we have these Armored Combat Support Vehicle ACSV TCV troop cargo vehicle variant of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, received from Canada as military aid. Apparently, they've received 39 of these, and these aren't something I don't think I've reported on these before, or if I have, I've forgotten. So much has happened in a year, and more than a year. So these will be super useful, right? 39 of them, absolutely brilliant. And they've got at least some of these, right? Then there are these as well. To me, this is a first picture of a Mercedes-Benz Zetro in service with the AFU. Last week alone, Germany delivered 16 of them to Ukraine. In total, Ukraine has 140 of these in service, while 60 more still need to be delivered by Germany. This is fantastic. They need this. Logistics is super important. This is where they have an asymmetrical advantage over the Russians. And Germany providing these, I mean, Germany is now the second biggest provider of stuff to Ukraine, as far as I can work out, and they are doing a sterling effort. So and that's fantastic. More than they can get. It's not just about tanks; it's about stuff that provides weapons and fuel to the tanks. Although they also need tanks. Ukraine to receive $244 million in humanitarian demining, according to Ukraine's Minister for the Economy, Yulia Syrienko. The funds will be allocated by foreign donors. So that will be. I know that people like Halo organization, which is a charity that works to demine around the world, is also working at the moment in Ukraine. One of the first instances of demining in a war zone, in a country that's still at war. But they get donations. They need donations from the private sector quite a lot, and they do, you know, uh, work in cooperation with the private sector quite a bit to try and drum up that money, and that's really important. So I don't know where all that money is coming from. I need to read the article, and there's only so many hours in a day. It turns out a new drone. Right, this is where we get on to. Right, this is what Russia are doing. This is a serious day or day of serious Russian changes and info on what they can bring to the table for their own forces. A new drone manufacturing facility Russia is building with Iran's help is expected to provide Russia with a new stockpile that is orders of magnitude larger than what it has been able to procure from Iran to date, Defense Intelligence Agency analysts say, reports CNN. This is quite worrying, and when you start understanding that perhaps they're getting microchips from a number of places like the Maldives, as I reported yesterday, then it's worrying because as soon as Russia are able to produce stuff at a rate that is needed for replacement, then this war goes on longer than is necessary. So it's really important that Russia can't do things like this. Ukraine need to continue with that asymmetrical advantage. Potentially significant news for Russian volunteer organizations providing the military with drones and other supplies. The State Duma adopted a law facilitating public procurement for the war in Ukraine. This means that the M&D units can now freely purchase what they need for cash. I'm absolutely staggered that they didn't do this like last March, stuff like this last March. But then they seem to be quite slow in changing things so that they can get stuff, whether that be equipment or procurement for military hardware, or whether it be human beings. They've taken a long time to change these rules, but these rules will make a difference. And they are making things. This will be. I'll probably read through this in the extra later, which is sounding like it's going to be about 6 hours long. But this is important. We are seeing the laws change in a number of different ways. So here, Russian regions will soon have the authority to establish their own private military companies and arm them, according to a proposed amendment that's been rushed through the State Duma. So suddenly, the Duma is just making loads of. I don't know whether there's this realization now that actually the SH1T is hitting the fan, and there's a much more widespread realization that Ukraine could prevail, and they need to change things quickly. The amendment allows governors to create state-owned enterprises during mobilization, military emergencies, or wartime to aid security forces in safeguarding the national borders, combating sabotage and reconnaissance groups and illegal armed formations. The decision to form and dissolve these military state-owned companies will rest with the president. The funding for their entities will come from both federal and regional budgets. They will be equipped with combat firearms. And in other words, they're not really mercenaries. They're just like paid for soldiers. They're still paid for by the state or regional authorities. I guess what it might allow you to do is not have long contracts and big payouts if they die or are injured. Maybe it's like a cheap army. Decision to they will be equipped with combat firearms and ammunition, what you'd expect, which must be returned after their disbandment. So again, it's this idea that you're in, now you're out. Actually, we need you again. No, you can go. Rather than right, you're contracted into the armed forces for this amount of time. We're going to give you this amount of training and so on and so forth. Employees of these state-owned military companies will be authorized to use physical force and firearms in the same situations as law enforcement personnel. Wow! So actually, this is a far wider reach than just army. They can be used as a kind of militia police force. They will also be permitted to neutralize unmanned vehicles of all types: aerial, surface, subsurface, and transport. Goodness, right? So things are changing. Things are afoot in the Russian sort of regions and within Russian administrations. And this, we can see here the need for more meat, says Nell reports. The Russian State Duma adopted a bill that provides for raising the draft age to 30 years old. It's currently 27. So now you can be drafted older. If you missed the draft previously, you can be caught until you're now 30. Young people from 18 to 30 can thus be called up for military service. The law will come into force on January the 1st, 2024. Now, I was listening to Ukraine the latest talk about this, saying that you might think that, that's a long time for that to start taking effect. But this is also a signal to the West. You say you're in this for the long haul, we're in this for the long haul, and we're putting things in place, to future-proof ourselves in terms of military enlistment. Quote, this law was written for a big war, a general mobilization, and this already is a big war, said the deputy. Wow. So, yeah, that's changing. And Russian regions will soon have the authority to establish their own private military companies and arm them. Shashant Joshi reacting to that news I was telling you about before. It's oh, let's pop into this. No, that's the one I just read you actually. That's Shashant Joshi, showing that it's going back to kind of historically feudal times. It's just, is this what you would have expected Russia to have been doing a year ago? At the beginning of this war, would you expect, a year down the line, they're still going to be grinding out, but they would have run out of armed forces personnel, so they're going to be starting up massive numbers of mercenary groups to try and drum up human resources. Yeah, I don't know. Worth looking at. Actually, Jan, I think, put me onto this. This is T90M performance analysis. So this is Red Effect's video looking at how many of these they're making a year, and it's anywhere from between 50 and 100 to like 150, I think, depending on how many are in a batch. And also it depends on whether the batches that come through are actually all brand new or whether some of them are repaired or upgraded, so on and so forth. But anyway, in terms of T90s, they are making them, and they are making them at a rate that's greater than they are losing them. But then T90s are a bit of a funny one because they don't use them much. They basically kept these away from the front line because I think they're afraid to lose them because they don't have too many of them. They're the more modern tank, a bit of a kind of flagship tank in a way. So actually, they haven't lost a crazy amount of these. So the fact that they're being constructed, manufactured at a rate that easily replaces their losses talks more to how they're being used. So we are starting to see them being used more and more, which is a sign that the other tanks have been attrited. So they're having to use these more and more. So you might get to a point where they are being attrited at a rate that outdoes their manufacturing rate. Anyway, that video is worth dipping into, just to give you a heads up there. Right, going on to geopolitical stuff. Sorry, there's so much content today. Right, Russia's Minister of Defense Shoigu has been sent to North Korea from yesterday to tomorrow to beg for military help. What does this tell you? It tells you that they're desperate for a start. It means that they really need help because otherwise they wouldn't be asking for it. They wouldn't be going to North Korea if they can make all the stuff themselves. So they are in a desperate situation. Question is, will they get stuff from North Korea? What will it be? Will it be huge amounts of ammunition, artillery ammunition? Could well be. That would be a challenge for the Ukrainians because actually we're getting to a stage where Ukrainians have degraded the Russian stockpiles of ammunition to quite a significant degree and their artillery pieces that it puts them in a good place to then start doing their larger maneuvers. As I've mentioned, this might set that dial back a bit again. Goodness me, I don't know that they've got enough medals. Holy cow. That's ridiculous, isn't it? Just look at that. I mean, it's like Russia. You get a medal for turning up. It's like primary school. Well done. You ran in the three-legged race. Have a medal. Oh, thanks for that. Well done. You didn't run in it because you hurt your toe. Have a medal. Okay, thanks for that. That's the North Korean army. Anyway, I've I've interrupted myself, as is my want. Yeah, so I think that is significant and it shows desperation, but it's also, yeah, you don't want North Korea to be giving a bunch of stuff to Russia either, because it will be used against the Ukrainians. Right, British Parliament Foreign Affairs Committee says for a decade the government was complacent and underplayed and underestimated Wagner's strength and abilities. Absolutely true. It's only now that everyone knows about Wagner because of the Ukraine war, but they were incredibly active in Africa and other places, Myanmar, it appears, and they have been generating income for the Russian state and for their own pockets as well. And that's kind of been under the radar, and we needed to have been on it, and we weren't, but hopefully we are now. I think America have been on it a bit more. They've been we've I've seen statements from the US administration officials going back some time about Wagner. I think they were a little bit more with it, but at least in the UK, not so much. Right, Hungary might leave the EU. Well, goodness me, this is pretty significant. So Bloomberg here reports, and I'll just get hold of this article. Hang on. So the article says, Bloomberg article says, Hungary has drifted closer to a scenario of potentially leaving the European Union, a former central bank governor said. Andras Simor, who helped steer Hungary through the financial crisis when it required an international monetary fund-led bailout, said an exit from the bloc is not the most likely scenario, but it is a possible one. It's a probability. If it was 10% last year, it's now risen to 20% to 30%, he told ATV television on Sunday. Hungary's budget deficit was widened to record after Prime Minister Viktor Orban engaged in a spending spree before last year's election, which he won. There's also got the highest inflation in Europe at the moment. Country is also the country also has EU's highest inflation and key interest rate at a time when more than $30 billion of EU aid remained blocked. Those funds have been withheld by the bloc over government backsliding on democratic commitments and alleged graft. This is a problem, right? When you have to pass, so Ukraine are doing this at the moment, and Zelensky came out last night in his speech to the nation, as he has every night, and talked about corruption and said, we are not going to stand for corruption. And if you're working in government and military enlistment offices and you're lining your own pockets, that ain't good, and it's all going to stop. So he was strong on corruption because there still is corruption in Ukraine, as we know, and there are still instances where people are being arrested, as we saw yesterday with the enlistment office officials. Anyway, Ukraine are trying really hard to improve their situation, so that one of the main reasons they're doing that is to do with things like IMF funding, accession to NATO, and accession to the EU. Now, if you jump through hoops to get into the EU. So you pass all these tests and you say, yep, we do this, 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 and this. Welcome to the EU. And you're in the EU. And then when you're in there, you start going, oh, I'm just going to keep hold of my power. So I'm going to get rid of these democratic institutions and mechanisms. I'm going to shut down the free press and I'm going to control the judiciary, which we've seen actually in Poland. So Poland's had democratic backsliding, although it's a really strong supporter of Ukraine. Behind the scenes, like if the Ukraine war hadn't happened, I would be doing videos on how dodgy Poland is democratically and politically. So Poland is not a ringing endorsement of democracy at the moment, in my opinion. Orban and Hungary even more. And the only reason these two aren't hanging out together is because of Poland's distaste for Russia and Orban's like for Russia, right? So otherwise, there are similarities between these nations, politically speaking, to some degree. But Orban, particularly, is shedding off the guise of being democratic. Well, they were. They were a functioning democracy, and they've democratically backslid. But what do you do with that? So once you're in the EU, so what the EU does is it withholds funding. Say, hang on, until you sort this out, we ain't going to give you money you deserve. But really, there needs to be almost a root and branch democratic change in Hungary, and that's a really big challenge for how that happens within the EU, and without the EU kind of enforcing it. Like you can't do a regime change; it has to come from within. But if the leader at the top is stopping that from happening from within, you get to a really big problem, and this is where the EU is at, which is all they can really do is bribe Hungary to try and do the right thing. And the end result of that is either they end up doing the right thing or they don't, and their position becomes untenable within the EU and they leave the EU. Maybe that's what's going to happen. At least it's a higher probability of that happening. I'm afraid that Hungary's government will maneuver the country into a situation where an exit from the European Union becomes a real alternative, said Timur, who is a fierce critic of Orban. Still, he said he doesn't expect Hungary's economy to implode. I rather expect a slow slide. Keep an eye on that. And then staying on Hungary, the participation of Russians in the Olympics can contribute to peace in Ukraine, said the head of Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Hungary, Peter Shatso, however you pronounce that. Well, I don't really think that is true, actually. The participation of Russians in the Olympics can contribute to peace in Ukraine. I don't know, but I think that sounds like something that someone that really likes Russia would say. And worrying position here. So nothing to see here, just a Russian state-funded think tank declaring Poland and the Baltics to be fake states. So if sometimes I think, well, Poland and the Baltics are worrying about Russia invading, they're never going to do that. Practically, Russia can't do that. They can't even take Ukraine. They would just be hammered if they tried to do that. Or NATO aside, they'd just be hammered by Poland, is my opinion. But, like, there is the thought process behind it. There's a worrying rhetoric behind it. All three republics, quote, all three republics, this is a Russian state think tank. All three republics, in fact, are breakaway parts of the large Russian space. The question of the legitimacy of sovereignty is not resolved. Yes, it freaking is. Oh my goodness. It's this special pleading of time, which is to say that we see Poland and the Baltics, or we see Ukraine in this time frame. Before that, yeah, I'm not worried about that. After that, yeah, they had their independence or whatever. No, here they were part of the European, part of the Russian space. How can you special plead a particular point in time, which would be different for each nation as well? Like at that point, though, it's like, yeah, it's like me saying India's part of the India's part of Britain. Why? Because I'm looking at a map from the Victorian period, and India is definitely part of Britain, and its sovereignty is not resolved. Yes, it is. Was it 1955 independence, something like that? I think it is resolved. Yeah, no, it's not. Because I say so. Because I'm the one that gets to dictate when we look at maps, and I also dictate the veracity of those maps. Like that map represents some kind of objective truth. No, it's not. It's maps are written by the victors, and how about self-determination of those people and blah 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 blah, etc etc. I mean, you get that this is absolutely ridiculous, but it's official. Like this is what they're, or at least these ideas are being sounded out. Quote, one can only hope that these neighbours of Russia, who demonstrate more adequate behaviour than Poland or the Baltics, will be able to save themselves and fit into the new conditions. Russia has already suffered enough with imperial responsibility. Shut up! Oh my word. The desperate behaviour of the Polish and Baltic elites in the conflict between Russia and the West perfectly demonstrates the degree of their internal uncertainty about the legitimacy of their own existence. Oh my days. Uncertainty about the legitimacy of their own existence. No one is uncertain about their legitimacy apart from you imperialistic stewards. A meeting of the new Ukraine NATO Council is scheduled to take place today, convened by the Secretary General of the Alliance, Jens Stoltenberg. In particular, it is planned to discuss the transportation of Ukrainian grain across the Black Sea. So out of NATO, it became this meeting, this group between Ukraine and NATO. So there's the Ukraine NATO Council, and they're meeting with a look to what to do with the Ukrainian grain situation. So that is obviously super important. I hope something good comes out of that. I'm just going to reel that the Russian Council here is coming out with stuff like this. I'm just going to go away and hit my head against a brick wall or something. Anyway, thank you so much. Please like, subscribe, and share. Really appreciate all your support. Toodle pips, and I'll speak to you later.